Bob Irwin. We are coming to you almost live from the gun store here in Las Vegas. We are streaming this on KDWN News Talk Radio worldwide at kdwn.com. You can find a button on that website to push, and you'll listen to the live stream almost. We're about 20-second delay on that radio. And we're also at the same time simulcasting on YouTube at Fired Up with Bob Irwin. If you want to watch the show, you can tune into YouTube and see us live. We had announced a couple of times that we were going to be on the Twitter program Periscope for this show. Unfortunately, the electronics didn't work as expected, so we are not broadcasting on Twitter. If you're hearing that on the radio, you'll discover we don't have a show on there, but we will get it up by next week. That's what I said last week, but I'm a persistent whatever I am. This show is about guns, politics, and related self-defense issues, gun-related politics, that is. And we encourage questions or comments that you may have about the show to be sent to us by email at bob@firedupmail.com. There's a sign just over my shoulder that says that, which will be up there for the rest of the show, hopefully. And we will answer all emails that we get. If one is of importance to general, sometimes they're very important to general audiences, and we will answer them on the air. But all questions will be answered by email by one of our attorneys or by me or whoever specializes, or gunsmiths or so forth. Depending on what your question is, we answer everybody. When this radio show ends at 7 o'clock. We continue on YouTube for 15-20 minutes with a little extra bump of some issues that we never seem to have enough time. That way we can finish the show whenever we want to. My guest tonight is murder defense specialist attorney Clark Patrick. Welcome again, Clark.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me again.
He has quite a background in criminal defense in murder cases and is a gun guy. Lots of background there, so we'll kind of get right into the show. But I want you to understand we always start out with a couple of self-defense cases. They are shooting cases that pretend to be self-defense. Some are good, some are bad, but we use cases that give an educational note to gun owners that give them a little food for thought. As I say, some are good, some are bad. We got a couple of really interesting ones tonight that will come up in just a bit. First, I want to talk about a story out of Detroit, Michigan that was on Fox 4 on the 3rd of September, a few days ago. An attempted robbery went bad for two suspects as the intended victim shot both of them. The armed citizen shot and wounded two robbers in a gunfight at a Citizens Bank ATM around 10 p.m. He was approached out of the darkness by two 18-year-old males. One was armed with a sawed-off rifle. The other had a handgun, according to a Detroit police captain who became the spokesman for this event. The intended victim had a valid CPL, that's concealed pistol license in their jargon in that state. At that point, some point in this, the victim decided not to be one, produced a weapon. Gunfight started between them. The CCW holder, CPL holder, was a 50-year-old guy who lives in the neighborhood. He was wounded in the leg. He shot one robber in the stomach, and the other one he hit in the face. The police arrested both robbers. None of the injuries to any of the parties appeared to be life-threatening. The cute part of this story was the captain, as we know, concealed weapon permits are now issued in Michigan, and there's lots of them now in Detroit. They're getting self-defense shootings constantly now, and actually the crime rate's gone down somewhat because of that. But anyway, the captain said to the media at the scene, looked at the camera and said, "Criminals beware. If you're going to play that game, people are going to defend themselves," which was nice to hear.
Yeah, that's good that the cops are behind that.
Yeah, they are, because the bad guys are getting shot, and actually Detroit, the murder rate is dropping. We got a little story later about how it's increasing around the country in all the major cities, but there's a couple of them that's going down, and one of them is Detroit because now that these people have concealed carry permits, less and less victims of crime. The gangbangers are still shooting each other and so on, but they're not shooting the people they rob because they're getting shot. So they're just picking out their targets with more care, apparently,
Right.
which would make sense. Detroit had the highest murder and violent crime rate of any major city in the U.S. in 2014. So far this year, there were 316 murders or non-negligent manslaughters in Detroit. But that's way behind what it was a couple of years ago. Part of that may be population drop.
Right.
There's simply less targets, and because there's a lot of empty houses and so forth there, as we all know. But a lot of it, the police feel, is being caused by the armed citizens who now make it a little more dangerous to rob people at 10 o'clock at night walking up to ATMs.
Sure, it's a lot different when you think everybody's unarmed versus now you don't know.
Yeah, the number of permits has just skyrocketed in Detroit, particularly the police now issuing them. There have been a couple of police chiefs, the last 2 or 3, that have been very, very pro-gun and literally told people it's time to arm yourselves because we can't get there for 15 minutes kind of thing. And there you are. We have another story on that too a little later. I wanted to interject something in the middle of this to get some information out. I received a call from a management guy with one of the 3-letter agencies that floats around in the federal government. You may guess who it was if you want. What he wanted to tell me is that there have been a whole bunch of fraud cases suddenly over the last about 3 months involving sale of what we call Class 3 firearms, machine guns and silencers and auto sears to make guns full automatic and so forth. Because they were outlawed, any new ones being made in 1986, the old ones are worth lots and lots of money. And apparently there's a couple of folks, more than one, who are putting on websites, the gun sale websites around the country, or sending emails out to gun clubs here and there that offers a deal on a Uzi or an M16 that's a pre-ban gun or a pre-ban sear that's transferable, and the prices are starting about half what they're worth. For instance, the common one now with this one group apparently is an M16 that's a pre-ban gun, and they only want $14,000 for it, which is about half what they're worth currently on the market because they're transferable still. They start with that bargain price of $14,000 when they put their ad in, whatever it is, or they call you. I got to get rid of it. I only want $14,000, and I'll take half down. So now it's only $7,000, and you can pay the rest when it clears. And they produce paperwork if you ask for it by email that is a fake transfer showing that they own the gun. They're doctored Form 4s and Form 3s. You don't even know what that is if you're not into machine guns, but it's paperwork that tells you ATF says this is a legal gun. Right. So you beat feet down to the place and wire them the money or send them a money order. And it takes about 6-7 months for these to clear the transfer. So 6 or 7 months later, you're calling the guy or writing him a letter and saying, well, did anything happen on my paperwork? And you get disconnected numbers and no such address because it's a fake. They get you all excited about buying a machine gun for 25% of what it's worth. And once they get your money, they're gone. They are gone. This is not an ATF case because there are no guns involved. There are no actual guns. Right. There's only fake paperwork. So this is being handled by another 3-letter group. You can guess who it was, but they told me I shouldn't say that on the air. But they wanted, the guy's a friend of mine, and he said, you know, we really need to get this out. If people are buying Class 3s, there are some bargains here and there on Gunbroker and other legitimate websites. You need to see the gun in person and the paperwork and examine the paperwork. before you send anybody money. Legitimate people that have machine guns or selling machine guns have all that. They know that. They all know these frauds are going on and nobody trusts them. We've sold guns here where somebody didn't actually believe, we were a dealer that we said we were and so forth. We direct them to the website, but of course that doesn't mean me that's talking to them on the phone actually has anything to do with the gun store,
Yeah.
And one guy actually flew out here. It's a $100 flight. Look at the store, look at the guns, see who are real. And, then he gave me a down payment on the gun. So take the time. There's a lot of fraud out there, just like selling you a 5-room mansion in the middle of Orlando. They got to get out of, and it's only $200. This is the same deal. They're just doing it with machine guns to suck you in. Make sure you're dealing with a legitimate company before you do that. Anybody selling you a Class 3 is going to want half down. That's pretty standard in our industry. Half down and half price is nobody legitimate is selling guns for half price. Anyway, back to shooting cases. We have a lot of stories always about children with guns. We've had a few of those locally, some protests and so forth and so on. This is KPLR TV 11 in St. Louis. An 11-year-old child shot a teenager that was trying to break in to his Hallwood Drive home in St. Louis, North St. Louis. The boy fired one round from a handgun and killed a 16-year-old suspect. Police report the two suspects tried to break into the home twice before the day before. One of the suspects finally got the front door unlocked at the home around 2:30 in the afternoon, while the 11-year-old and his 4-year-old sister were at home alone. That's when the 11-year-old got a gun that was there in the house. He'd been shown how to work it. He shot and killed one of the intruders. The second suspect ran, of course, when the shots were fired. That's pretty standard. The St. Louis police have taken him into custody. The officers found the body of the first intruder with a gunshot wound to the head in the front foyer of the home. They're talking to the mother to determine why the kids were home alone. Yeah. They also want to know why 11-year-old had access to a gun, and they believe the mother purchased the gun after a prior attempt to break into her house. That's pretty common. She is cooperating in the investigation. Only in St. Louis, I think somebody would be concerned about how an 11-year-old got hold of a gun when he obviously saved his own life and his little sister's life.
Absolutely.
It's a good thing he had access to the gun.
And it sounds like he probably had some training to go along with it, which is even better.
Did as he had been instructed, and he ran over to the next house, I understand, afterward to get somebody to call 911 and so on. But he's okay. His sister's okay. Only one of the bad guys is dead. The other guy's in jail. It's
Good
a
ending.
good thing the 11-year-old had access to a gun. If you live in one of these neighborhoods, you probably want your kids, if they are left by themselves, to be able to handle the gun. And there's a lot of issues there with kids and guns and all that from a lot of people who are not really anti-gun. They're just do-gooders and believe that anytime a child has a gun, it's wrong. In this case, it was very right. The kid is going to have a lot of stuff to go through. Having been through this episode at age 11, it's going to be tough, but it's a lot better than going through what he could have gone through.
Absolutely.
Had he or his sister been injured or killed. So he's defending his sister and did a good job. As I mentioned, we continue on YouTube after this broadcast ends at 7 o'clock on KDWN Radio. And if you're looking for us on Periscope, we're not there. We couldn't get the electronics going tonight. Sorry about that. We will promise again to be next week up on Periscope. So you can watch us, please, on your iPad or whatever, but not while you're driving. This next story is a little more complicated. And this came from a fellow named Dean Weingarten on the website Truth About Guns. And it is the issue of warning shots from a little bit different perspective. And what happened here on December 16th, 2013, a 66-year-old resident of an apartment there in Enid, Oklahoma. I left that out. ENID, Enid, Oklahoma. Sorry, Oklahoma, if I don't know how to pronounce it right. Anyway, this 43-year-old was over visiting, and the two men got into a shouting match over something undisclosed, and it's not important to the point of the story anyway. They got into a physical fight. The resident pulled a gun, ordered the guy out of the house. The guy tried to attack him, according to him. He shot the guy. After he shot the guy, he panicked over this situation and he ran. This is the resident. Jumped in his car, drove away. They caught him the next day. They had a bulletin out for the car and so forth. Caught him in Kansas, a couple hundred miles away. He's charged with manslaughter, and the bond was set at $1 million. He's 66 years old, did not have the money to make bail, so he stayed in jail until now. 20 months later, he's still in jail. They had a trial, and the jury, looking at what happened, we'll do a little detail on the case, which is what clerk's job is. They found him not guilty after less than an hour's deliberation. Interestingly, his use of warning shots, he fired a couple of shots into the ceiling, into the floor. The guy kept coming, and then he shot him again. And the crime lab kind of bears that out from what they could tell. I understand there's no witnesses. The one guy's dead, the other guy is telling the story, and that's always a problem with these cases. Anyway, the defense attorney brought up that he clearly was warning the guy off with the shots, and therefore it's the visitor's own actions not taking that warning that got him shot, and he's using the warning shots instead of screaming at the guy, "Get away from me or I'll shoot you." There's a myth out there that warning shots can never be seen as evidence that the victim wasn't in fear of his life. Have you ever seen one of these go this direction, where
I have not.
The warning shots
with the warning shot
were brought up? They're usually brought up by the prosecution,
right?
and people go to jail for firing warning shots that, because this guy was
Absolutely.
unarmed and so forth, but we got a big age difference and so forth. Most instructors don't